Hi everyone, Plastic EP here from Melbourne, Australia. I've got the fantastic Jude Kessler. What more can you say? Her books, her expertise, you just can't beat it. Minute per minute, day per day. How are you today, Jude?
I am doing wonderful. I'm so glad to be back on your energetic, exciting, fun show. Thank you very, very much.
No, thank you, Jude, because I learned so much from you. Like, the only way I can explain it to you, with your fantastic books, what's left now for sale? What volume you got for sale?
There's only one that's still available in physical copy. They're all on every ebook format that you could want. But this one, I have about 30 copies of this one left. This is volume 4, which is 1964. You pick up with the Beatles after they come back from the United States doing the Ed Sullivan shows and Carnegie Hall and all that. And it takes you through the making of A Hard Day's Night, their very first world tour, the premieres of A Hard Day's Night in London and Liverpool, their North American tour, their UK tour, another Beatles Christmas show. It is one exciting book. It's the height of Beatlemania. And for people that, like the other books, like this is the first one, which is John's Childhood in 10 Years. If you cannot get the books in physical form, that's almost better. And I'll tell you why. The books are written just like you're reading a story or a novel, but they are all true. They're documented and footnoted with thousands and thousands of footnotes. There were 4,400 in the last book. And the footnotes have extra information. When you're using your free Kindle app, let's say, I'm sure there's one for Nook too, on your phone, and you get to one of those footnotes, you touch the screen and the information for the footnote pops up. You read it, you touch it again, and it's gone. So much easier than constantly flipping to the back of the book to read the footnote. So they are really, really readable on ebook format. But if you want a physical book, this is the only one that isn't sold out in physical book, the most recent one, which you should have known better.
And where do they get it from? Tell everyone where they buy it from.
JohnLennonSeries.com. That's the cheapest price. That's my website, JohnLennonSeries.com. But you, of course, can get it on Amazon and thefest.com, which is the Fest for Beatles fans. So any way that you buy it, I will sign it and date it and include a cute sticker for your guitar case or your car that says, "Give John a chance." And I autograph everyone personally and send them all out personally. So however you get it, it'll go through me.
Jude, I've got to ask you, how long before book number 5 comes out?
About a year and a half. I'm making good progress. If you'd asked me that 3 months ago, I'd have been like, I don't know, but I'm working every day. It looks like we're looking at about a year and a half.
You know what? Because I'm waiting for my copy. As you said, when it's done, you said I'll be getting one for free, so I can't wait.
You are. Not only that, but I'm putting you in the acknowledgements with my thanks for all of your support and encouragement. So
I can't thank you enough, Jude, because I've got to tell you, it's very important that people understand if you want something in depth and something that takes so many years to write, what you actually pay for the book is such a small token compared to the amount of work that goes into the book. For example, the one that's for sale now, how many years did it take you to write that one? The one that there's only 30 copies left.
5 years. And it's so slow because since I write it like a narrative, at the end of every sentence, I have to go back and tell people, because they'll say, how does she know that? How does she know that happened? How does she know that they had chicken and chips for dinner? Well, because the promoter of that concert in Montreal told Chuck Gunderson what he served them. And Chuck Gunderson, in his fabulous book, Some Fun Tonight, which guided me through the North American tours, said that's what they had. I have to footnote that. And if AJS Rail, who also reported on the North American tour, said it, I have to footnote her book and the year that and the page that she said it on. It's a slow, tedious process. And part of what I do at the end of every chapter is compare what all the biographers said, because obviously they don't agree. And we try to get to the heart of what really happened, not legend and rumor. So it's a very slow process.
Now, before we start with the Beatles part one, I need to ask you, how's your show going with your other friend and when it's on? Tell me about your show.
You are so sweet to ask. She said, with my friend Lena, we are so excited, and I will invite you right now on our Zoom recording. We are going to have a birthday party on Thursday night, right before John's birthday in October, to kick off his birthday weekend. There's going to be a virtual fest for Beatles fans that weekend. And on Thursday night, we're gonna have the kickoff party. And we would like to invite you to be on it and to give a toast to John Lennon that night. So yep. I'll send you more details. We'd love to have you on
no problem. Now, also, I want to ask you, how was the other virtual Beatle Fest you were with?
It was phenomenal. I was so sad because we weren't going to get to be there with everyone. But instead of being limited to just people from the Chicago area or the drivable area, 2 or 3 hours out, we had people from all over the world. It was so good. Mark Lewison did a great presentation. Ken Womack with his new book. You just had Ken on your show.
I've already had Ken. I've done Ken's book.
It's so good, so good. I just did the book review for it. That's going to be in Culture Sonar. He did a presentation on John Lennon in 1980. I did a presentation from the new book. Ivor Davis, that you've had on your show before. Ivor talked about the Beatles meeting Elvis because he was one of 2 reporters there that night. It was a great, great weekend. So good.
Fantastic. Now, is there anything you need to show us before we go to With the Beatles Part 1, Jude?
I don't think so. I'm going to be reading a little segment from book 3, She Loves You, which is 1963. And that's the year that we're in as the second LP of the Beatles comes out. So I'm going to read a little bit from that. This is 63 and part of 64 because this includes the trip to the US to do Ed Sullivan. And I'm also going to be reading from a phenomenal book by Anthony Robustelli called I Want to Tell You, The Definitive Guide to the Music of the Beatles, Volume 1, 1962 to 63. Most books about Beatles music only cover their original work. But Anthony covers both their original songs and the way they handle the cover songs. And that's super important because we got to remember when the Beatles start out, they're not just singer-songwriters, they're entertainers. And they take old standards and they give it their own spin. And so it's important to see what's different about the way the Beatles handle a classic song and the way that everybody else did. And of course, we'll be talking about that today on With the Beatles, but we'll be reading a little bit from this great book too.
I'll chase him up. I'll try and interview him. It sounds like a fascinating book.
Oh, it is a great, great book. And he has a podcast on Beatles-orama Radio on Sunday nights that breaks down each song into its component parts. You talk about somebody that knows music. Anthony Robustelli he teaches music in New York City at university level. So great guy.
Now, just to tell everybody, we're going to do every album of the Beatles on the UK discography, just so everyone knows we're not following the American ones, we're following the British ones, which that is what we got here in Australia. So as you know, with this album with the Beatles, came out with 4 heads on it. John Lennon came in 64 to Australia and was not happy with the cover, the Australian cover. And he told them off. He said, I don't like this. This doesn't look good. So just so everyone knows, so we'll begin now with the Beatles, part 1.
Okay, so what was happening with the Beatles at the time that they make With the Beatles? All right, when you think about them going into the studio, Plastic, in February of 1963 to make their very first LP, Please Please Me, they are drawing on 4 years of being a band. All their best songs, the songs that they've been doing on the boards in the Cavern Club, in Litherland Town Hall and Latham Hall, they have had years to collect those songs and put them together, and they use their very best stuff. right after they finish doing that, they have pressure immediately to record their next single because they've got to put out so many singles per year, so many LPs per year. And by March the 5th, they are back in EMI Studios, back in Studio 2, back with George Martin, and Norman Smith is their engineer, and my buddy Richard Langham, the second engineer, and they are making their single From Me to You. So it's not until they finish doing that, which let's say March the 6th or 7th, that they begin to turn their attention to their next LP, which is going to be with the Beatles. They have from March let's say the 7th to April the 7th, May the 7th, June the 7th. And by June 30th, they are in studio recording with the Beatles. So instead of having 4 years to draw upon, they've only got about 4 months to make this next LP. And things are moving at a rapid pace for them because they are climbing the ladder to fame as quickly as they can move their arms and legs. And I want to read you just a short segment from Volume 3 in the John Lennon series, She Loves You. This is what's going on with them as they're also trying to write the songs with the Beatles. It was all happening. Toppermost of the poppermost, toppermost spinning, poppermost igniting now. Even in America, the upward spiral had begun. Brian had indeed secured top billing for the Beatles on 3 successive Ed Sullivan shows, all expenses paid, luxurious trip to New York and Miami, and a hefty performance fee to boot. A February trip to America. It was accomplished, guaranteed. And over at Capitol Records, Brown Meggs, the director of Eastern Operations, had finally agreed to release I Want to Hold Your Hand to the American public on 13 January 1964 to promote the group to the hilt. The Beatles, John thought, aren't bigger than Elvis yet, but we're coming up. This morning, their latest LP with the Beatles had been released, a blend of clever originals and unique cover songs that had been recorded back in June and July when life had still made an inkling of sense. And frankly, to John, the LP was a blur, a bizarre collage of images and memories, a spinning symbol telling the world who he had once been and who he dreamed of becoming. The record was a melange of lust, greed, hope, love, aspiration, inspiration, sweat, hate, desire, hunger, pain, fate, sex, loss, disappointment, elation, stamina, passion, power, mourning, disaster, courage, and cowardice, and caprice, and cadence. As the dark platter spun round and round on 270,000 turntables this afternoon, John's vision would splay and swirl with the Beatles, with the Beatles, with the Beatles, with the Beatles. Could anyone begin to understand all that really entailed? John was sure they could not, and they never would. So that's what this LP was. As they're beginning to skyrocket to fame, this LP, written in only 4 months, is trying to tell people not only who they used to be, which is what they did with Please Please Me. Here we are, the Cavern Club band, but it's now telling them who they want to become, this group that's moving toward Ed Sullivan. So when were these songs written that they put on the new LP with the Beatles? Well, unlike the last one, they weren't written casually over 4 years. They were written under duress. They were written on the tour bus with Roy Orbison. They got to tour with Roy through May and June of 1963. So sitting together on the tour bus, these songs were scribbled on the backs of envelopes and newspapers and torn scraps of paper. And the Beatles, who were addicts to work. I've never known anyone, even my mother, who was a workaholic. No one worked as hard as the Beatles did. They were always working. Now, the good thing was that even though they only had 3.5 to 4 months to write these songs, they had much broader influences than they did in writing their first Please Please Me. First of all, they're no longer in Liverpool. They're down in the Big Smoke, the Big Smoke. And so Paul is going to operas and theater, and they're all going to posh parties. They're invited to celebrity parties. They're rubbing shoulders with celebrities, and they have many more cosmopolitan influences than they had when they wrote Please Please Me. So their songs are beginning to show a definite maturity. In fact, and here's what a little short segment I wanted to share with you from Anthony's book. He says, less than 3 weeks after recording She Loves You, they began work on With the Beatles, a significantly more sophisticated piece of work than their first debut LP. The songwriting was harmonically and melodically more advanced. The performances were more inventive. The selection of cover songs was more urbane, and the overall presentation was hipper and more artistic. So what can you say? You've gone in 4 months from colloquial Liverpool to urbane London. You've gone from, I'm going to perform the songs we did on the boards, to let's do something inventive. So With the Beatles is going to be a significant improvement over Please Please Me. That's pretty cool in only 4 months, isn't it?
Amazing. Can I just ask you a question? Jude, just one quick question. When they were on the bus, they wrote a song, Misery, for the 14-year-old singer that was on the show as well. What was the name again? I just left
Helen Shapiro.
That's right. Now, apparently she didn't get the song because her manager didn't pass it on, but they wrote it on the bus for her. Is that correct?
She heard it and she loved it. She had a big crush on John Lennon, and when they were on the tour bus, she sat with him and he treated her like a little sister. He always helped her cross the street. He was very sweet to her. She was extremely young, and she loved Misery, loved it. But Norrie Paramore, who was her manager, thought that she should go in a more country vein, that she would be successful. And he wanted to take her to Nashville to record. So he didn't like this rock and roll song, even though it was a slower, ballad type song. He wanted her to go more country, and he turned it down. So too bad. I think her voice would have been perfect for it.
What a great song, Miseries. The world is treating me bad. Misery. Bum, 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 bum. One of my favorites.
It is a great song, and it's definitely a John song because it's his theme song. It's the same thing he keeps singing over and over in I'll Cry Instead and I'm a Loser and Not a Second Time. It's his story of his life, which we're going to talk about in the very, very first song on With the Beatles. Same story, the story of the girl that he loved who didn't love him and who left him behind and who abandoned him. And of course, that's his mother, Julia. And that's it. So when we start the LP, when we start with the Beatles, that's the first story that we're going to hear. Now, when we left the Beatles at the very end of Please Please Me, the last thing that you heard was the sound of John Lennon's voice, raspy, guttural, sexy, singing, twist and shout. We start this LP with just John's voice, with It Won't Be Long, same voice. He's welcoming all the fans back, and he's saying, it's been a long time since we've been together, and I've missed you, but it won't be long. As you play this record, it won't be long till I belong to you. And
what a great song with all chip in it goes, it won't be long, yeah, 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 yeah. It won't be long, yeah, 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 yeah. It won't be long, yeah, till I belong to you. Do, 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 do. What a great song that is.
See, there it is. You got all the classic Beatle elements. You've got those romping guitars. You've got Ringo's strong backbeat. And of course, the yeah, yeah, yeahs, they're back. They know which elements to use, but what the Beatles don't do is they never, how some bands will have a hit song and then their next song is that same song. It's only just slightly different. They tweak it just a little bit. This It Won't Be Long is nothing like anything they've ever done before. It's new and it's fresh and it's different. So it's not a copy song. Now, during the time that they're making this LP, John Lennon has discovered dun, 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 double tracking, and he's fallen in love with it. Even though George Martin said he had the best voice in rock and roll, and I totally agree, John hated his voice, always hated his voice. And from the moment he found double tracking, well, this is what he said. He said, with the Beatles, that's when we discovered double tracking. When I discovered it, I double tracked everything after that. I wouldn't let George Martin have anything single track from then on. He would say, please, just this one. And I would say, no. And definitely John's voice is double tracked on It Won't Be Long. Now, what is the song about? Well, Thelma Pickles, who was John's girlfriend before Cynthia at Liverpool College of Art, the two of them got together because her father had left their family, and she said pissed off and left us. And so she grew up in what was considered a scandalous home in Liverpool of the 1950s. I mean, there just wasn't divorce and abandonment in Liverpool of the 1950s. And John said, well, I didn't have either one of my parents. I live with an aunt and uncle. And that bond drew them together. And as they used to sit together at the steps of the Victoria Monument in Liverpool and talk, he told Thelma about his mother, who at age about 4.5, had left him to be raised by his aunt and uncle, Mimi and George Smith. Now, it's a complicated story. No one is really to blame. Julia's father, Pop Stanley, was involved in the decision, and he felt that Julia was too capricious and too irresponsible to raise John, and really put the pressure on her to surrender this little boy to her older sister, very sensible, the model of duty, Mary Elizabeth or Mimi Smith, to raise. And she does give up the little boy. But when years later, John finds out that his mother lives only about 1.5 miles away from where he's being raised by his aunt and uncle, and has 2 children, 2 daughters, Jackie and Julia, by the man that she loves, John Dykins, he begins to reason out, as a little boy, of course, would. Oh, it's not kids that she doesn't want. She has 2. It's just me she doesn't want. And it is the story that he sings for the rest of his career. The story of how he loved her, she didn't love him. All the way up to the White Album, when he sings that song, Julia, half of what I say is meaningless, but I say it just to reach you, Julia. He is singing, and in It Won't Be Long, he's singing this song about how every night, he's sad and he's alone and he's wishing that he had her. Now, one of the themes of John's music, because he thinks he's done something to push his mother away, he thinks he's done something to make her not want him, is all through his music, he apologizes. He says, I'll be good. I'll be a good boy. All the way through Cold Turkey. If you'll just have me back, I'll behave. I'll be a good boy. And here he's saying that again. He's saying, since you left me, I'm so alone, but you're coming back home. I'll be good, like I know I should. You're coming home. You can just see this little boy so excited that his mother is actually coming back to him, and that he's going to be good. He's not going to lose her this time. And Julia would turn up at times to see John, because as I said, she lived just about 1.5 miles away. There was one particular instance that you and I've talked about where he needed an Indian costume for a play at school. And Julia assured her sister, Mimi, that she would come over and make sure that John got a costume. So John and Pete Schotten, his buddy that lived on Vale Avenue, very close to where John lived, at 251 Menlove, are both over at the house, and they're waiting on her to show up. She breezes in and she says, before we make the costume, let's make war paint. And they get flour and water and food coloring, and she paints their faces, and they whoop around the kitchen, woo, and they're doing all this stuff. They never get around to making a costume. They mess the kitchen up, the boys are dirty, and Julia leaves. And Mimi has to clean up the mess and make the costume. And that's kind of the story of John's life. His mother was in and out for fun, and Mimi was there for the duration, doing what needed to be done. So he always was longing for that fun, beautiful, unreachable woman. And that's what this song is really about. Very, very sad song. Now, Paul says that he helped with the song, that he helped to tweak it. But this song is very, very John Lennon-esque. If you listen to the wordplay, it won't be long till I belong to you. That's what John loved to do. In his book, which is Over My Shoulder, his first book in his own right, and in Spaniard in the Works, you see him loving this verbal double meaning and word leapfrog. And so it's very, very much a John Lennon song. And Tony Barrow, who was the NIMS press agent, wrote on the liner notes for the book, he says, John Lennon gets this LP off to a rip-roaring start. And I mean, no words could be truer. It was recorded on the 30th of July. And it was recorded with George Martin as the producer and Norman Smith as the engineer and Richard Langham as second engineer. And what a great way to begin this new, more sophisticated LP. So yay for John. And actually, John is the one that also does song number 2, which is All I've Gotta Do. Now, this is one of my favorites because I am a big fan of Cynthia Lennon. You know, Art Schreiber, Ivor Davis, who's been on your show, and Larry Kane, who you would love to interview. I don't know if have you talked to Larry Kane yet, Plastic?
Not yet, but I will. But let me tell you, all I got to do is call you on the phone and you'll come running home. That's all I got to do. So every time we get every song, test my memory and I'll sing a line of the song.
I love it. I love it. Well, it's as you can see from those words, it's the story of his relationship with his wife, Cynthia. Those journalists, the Schreiber and Davis and Kane that traveled with John in 1964, said that every single night he would carve out time on the 1964 world tour to go call his wife. And that's what this song is about. I mean, written in 63, it's predating that event. But when John was away, whether on the Roy Orbison tour or the Helen Shapiro tour or wherever, he would call Cynthia. And anytime that he missed her, he was lonely for her. They were very, very much in love at this point. And he did not have to marry Cynthia. He simply could have said, well, we'll need to work this out some other way. He immediately suggested marrying Cynthia when he found out she was pregnant. They loved each other. They talked to each other all the time. And he's saying that this is how they connect. They can connect by the phone. And the same goes for her. Whenever she wants him at all she's got to do is make that call. And for the newlyweds, that's how they kept their marriage together during long separations. So this tells their love story. It was recorded 1 year to the date from the time that the Beatles had written their very first single, Love Me Do. It's written on the 11th of September. It's recorded on the 11th of September, 1963. And you think about the difference between All I've Got to Do and Love Me Do, 1 year apart. The Beatles have really matured as artists. This is one of John Lennon's most overlooked songs. It's a great song and people really don't give it any credit. But Anthony Robustelli, in that book I was sharing with you, said it's one of John's most powerful vocals, most powerful ballads, most powerful love songs. So people need to go back and listen to it. It's very tender and it's very unique. And it is one of the few songs that he writes for Cynthia. He's very private about his relationship, but that one was for her. So go back and listen to it again. So, okay, sing the next one for us.
Okay, give
All
me
My
the title.
Lovin'. Huh?
You got to give me the title of the song.
All My Lovin'.
All my lovin', I will sing to you. All my lovin', darling, I'll be true. Do. I love it.
And that, of course, is a Sir Paul McCartney song. And
My favorite song, actually. My favorite song. If I ever wished, I wrote a song in 1963. The most underrated song is All My Lovin'. Should have been put out as an A single. The greatest song. Always in their concerts at that time. I love it.
It is a great song. And you know, there's a quote that says, a song is a crippled poem that leans on music for support. Well, one of the reasons you probably love this song so much is that it is not that. It was a poem first. and the music was superfluous. The music, Paul almost always writes his music first and then fits in the lyrics to match the music, but that's not true with this song. He was shaving one morning in the house that he lived in with the Ashers. He lived close to Peter in his little garret room, and he was shaving, and he came up with this love poem that he was writing for Jane Asher. He wrote the entire poem, and it wasn't until later that evening that he started putting music to it. So it is a very strong song lyrically because it's written as a poem, and it's just about the only song that Paul ever wrote that way. He usually flip-flops that process. The Beatles loved it. In fact, for baby boomers that are watching this show, especially American baby boomers, they probably remember that song more than any other because it was the first song that the Beatles sang when they appeared on the Ed Sullivan Show for the first time. So that image that you get of them on the Ed Sullivan Show is singing All My Lovin'. Now, as John Lennon's biographer, I would be remiss if I didn't mention that he plays a huge part in this song, because John had gotten sick of people saying he was just a great songwriter. He wanted someone to notice that he was a great rhythm guitarist. So he developed a really unusual rhythm line, and he learned to play it at what he called hurricane speed, and it's the background of this song. And he played it for Cynthia and said, when I go into EMI tomorrow and I play this for them, they're going to be bowled over. They're going to say, you're a great rhythm guitarist, John. Well, nobody even noticed. They didn't even comment on it. And he was so proud of it, and he was so disappointed that no one noticed. But go back and listen to the song, and you will hear what a great rhythm line it is. John was inspired by the Crystals hit, "Da Do Ron Ron." The rhythm line seems very much like the one that the Crystals used. So go back and listen to it again, and I think you'll hear that great line in there. But this is a brilliant song by Paul McCartney, and of course is one that they took on the North American tour with them, and they were very proud of All My Lovin'. All right, you are up with Don't Bother Me.
The George Harris song.
Yeah.
It's a very good song. Don't Bother Me. Yeah, that's right. I might not be able to sing too much of that one because it's okay. It's his first attempt at writing a song, and it's, how can I tell you, it fits on the album all right. It's not one of my favorites though, I got to say.
Well, we have to blame that on Bill Harry, my buddy Bill Harry. Bill had been telling George for a year, why are you letting John and Paul write all the songs? What's wrong with you? You're smart, you're talented, you're as talented as they are. Why don't you write a song? And George kept saying, oh, no, yeah, they're the duo, and he wouldn't do it. Well, in August of 1963, they go to Bournemouth, and they are performing in Bournemouth on the seaside, beautiful area where their hotel is overlooking the water and all the beautiful umbrellas and blankets that are spread out on the beach. And it must have been inspirational because while they're in Bournemouth, Ringo writes Don't Pass Me By. Suddenly Ringo's writing music. And George, who is sick, he has a sore throat and he feels really terrible, is in his room. And Paul goes down there to check on him and finds him writing a song. And Paul is so upset by it that he runs up to John's room. Cynthia has just been discovered by the press about a week before. They found out that John's married, and it's all over the newspapers. So because it is, Brian has let Cynthia come on this trip with John. So she's actually there with him. Paul bangs on the door, and the two of them let Paul in, and he says, you're not going to believe what's going on. And John's like, what? And he's like, George is writing a song. And John's
this one. I got no time for you right now. Don't bother me.
Right, which is probably how George felt with that sore throat and Paul running down to his room, banging on his door. Don't bother me. Leave me alone. Don't bother me. But he says to John, he's writing a song. And John has this great quote, who told him that he could? Who told him that he could? But he does write it, and it is very George-esque because as early as his very first song, George is putting unusual instruments in the song. And that's what he's going to do throughout his career. He's going to be the one to introduce the sitar and to bring in groups of people to chant on his songs and to bring in bells and to bring in all sorts of unusual instruments. Now, on this song, George's voice is double tracked, and he has Paul beating out a rhythm, Paul, on what they call a clave. It's a hollow boned rhythm tune, a clave. And John is playing the tambourine. So Ringo is on this loose skinned Arabian drum that's a kind of a bongo of sorts. So from the very beginning that George begins to write his very first song, he's using alternative instruments, and that's going to go all through his career. Now, Tony Barrow really didn't give George much credit in the liner notes for this song. He does call it his debut release, but he doesn't give him a lot of credit for it. And it was a very sweet, melodic song, and it probably set another trend too, because if you think of George's songs like Little Piggies and Not Guilty, he
Savoy
always
Truffle.
Well, it was Savoy Truffle's kind of a nice one, but Piggies and Not Guilty, he's kind of like fed up with John and Paul. And here too, he's like, don't bother me, leave me alone. He's starting to get in that same theme of I'm kind of mistreated and don't bother me. So, but I like it a lot. I like the sound of it. It's really great for a first cut, you know. So then we come to one that is totally unique on With the Beatles. Anthony Robustelli, in this great book of his, tells us that there are only 3 songs on With the Beatles, just 3, that are actually collaborations. When I wrote my first book, which was Should Have Been There, and it was about the early years of John and Paul and George and Pete at that time. Pete was with them through this book. And then the second book, Shivering Inside, which is the early days of all 4 Beatles together, I did not depict them as writing many songs collaboratively. And one of the reviewers said, why didn't you have the boys collaborate on all the songs? Well, that's because they didn't. There are only 3 songs on this album that are collaborative. One is Little Child, which is the song that we're up to now. One is Hold Me Tight, and the other one is I Want to Be Your Man. They're the only 3 collaborative songs. So Plastic, Little Child, take it away.
Say it again.
Little Child, take it away.
Little child, little child, little child, won't you dance with me? I'm so sad and lonely. Baby, take a chance on me. I
like it. I like it. Has a little bit of that Elvis sound to it.
Elvis has left the building. You know what we're doing? Every time we do a song, you got to say the title and see if you can stump me out. Let's see if there's a song I can't sing.
Okay, we'll do that. We'll do that. Well, Paul is playing the piano on this number, and John's playing the harmonica. So that old harmonica sound that was so popular on Please Please Me is back again.
From me to you. I love the harmonica on that.
Oh, yeah. You know, it's just wailing. Now, the song was written for someone else. It was not written for the Beatles to sing. That much we know. The Beatles were, in their spare time, as if they had any spare time, writing lots of songs for other members of the NEM stable. They wrote for Billy J. Kramer, I'll Be on My Way, and Bad to Me. They wrote Love of the Love for Cilla Black. They wrote Tip of My Tongue for Tommy Quickly. And this song was definitely written for someone else. Now, Paul says it was written for Ringo. And the story that Paul tells is they wrote this for Ringo, but they were also collaborating on another song called I Want to Be Your Man. And Ringo was fine with doing Little Child until he heard I Want to Be Your Man. And then he's like, that's the song I want to sing. I Want to Be Your Man. I want that to be my song. So the Beatles were left to record Little Child, and they never really wanted to record it. Their heart wasn't in it. They recorded 20 7 times on 2 different nights, but they never do really get it right. And you can tell they don't really care, because John doesn't even insist that his voice be double tracked, which he always did. He doesn't make it double tracked. About 35 seconds into the song, if you listen to it, John sings the wrong lyrics and he says, nah, don't correct it, just leave it. And on the stereo version, the voices come in on top of the harmonica. So there are lots of mistakes in Little Child, but the cool thing about that is that this one performance on With the Beatles feels live. It feels like you're back in the Cavern Club again. It feels like you're back sitting there watching the Beatles from the front row. And I dare, double dog dare anybody out there to put on Little Child and not tap your toe or snap your fingers or rock your head. You're going to, because even though it has mistakes in it, it is a great Beatles number. It's the Beatles of old. It's the Beatles of Please Please Me. Back again. All right, here's your song. Are you ready, Plastic? Here's the next one. It is Till There Was You.
There were birds on a hill, but I never heard them singing. No, I never heard them at all till there was you.
That's right. That is it. Well, this was a Brian choice. Brian loved the Beatles singing this song. They used to sing it in the Cavern Club, and the girls swooned over it. Paul sings it, of course, and they're like, oh, Paul. If Paul had known where this song really came from, he would never have recorded it, but he did not know. His cousin used to play for him what he thought were edgy, strange, different rock and roll songs. Her name was Elizabeth Danner, D-A-N-H-E-R. She's now Elizabeth Robbins. And she played him songs like Fever. You remember Fever? And he thought those were real cool, slow rock and roll songs. That's what he thought Till There Was You was. It was rock and roll song, but it was slow. He had no idea that it was from The Music Man. Right. A Broadway hit. No idea. He would have thought that was Squaresville, but he didn't know that. Meredith Willson wrote the song, and because Brian had gone to the Royal Academy of Dramatic Arts and was a theater person, he loved the Beatles singing this song to show their versatility. That's the reason that he asked them to do it at the Decca audition, because he wanted to show the people at Decca that the Beatles could do a wide variety of songs. Yes, they could do rock and roll, but they could do humorous songs like Three Cool Cats and stage songs like Till There Was You. So that's the reason Brian liked it so much. Well, the girls liked it because it's romantic and it's Paul and he's singing this romantic song to them. But Paul sort of had an issue with Till There Was You, and that is he learned the words incorrectly, and as many times as Brian corrected him, he never could get the words right. He sang them incorrectly when he sang it at the Royal Command performance on the 4th of November, 1963, and he sings it wrong on the recording. But I guess that's part of the charm of the song, and they just left it. But he says, and there was music, and wonderful roses they send me. No, the words are, and there was music and wonderful roses, they tell me, in sweet, fragrant meadows of dawn and dew, meaning this all existed, they tell me, but I never knew it until there was you. Well, he says, roses they send me. And he also says, in sweet, fragrant meadows of dawn and you. So I guess that girl was out in the field with the dawn. It was dawn and dew, but Brian kept correcting him. He kept singing it the other way. And Brian said, just let him sing it any way he wants to. People love it. Let's just sing it. Ringo tried playing the drums on this song initially, and they were too heavy and too overpowering. So he does really soft, lovely bongo work. And George takes this song, and this is why I love it when the Beatles do cover songs. I love to see what they do with them. George takes a song and writes a lead line for it that is top notch. So even when the Beatles do a cover song, they make it special and unique. And I think this is one of their very best. I mean, obviously they loved it or they wouldn't have selected to do it at the Royal Command performance. So, all right, EP, you ready for the next one?
Yep, I'm ready. Let's go.
Here we go, Mr. Plastic. Please, Mr. Postman.
Wait a minute, Mr. Postman. Wait, Mr. Postman. Mr. Postman, look and see. Oh, yeah, if there's a letter for me. Oh, yeah, right.
That's it. You have got it. Now, this one sounds like it could be and is a cover song because it has the sound of Motown. You are just rocking to the Motown swing. And as we all know, the Beatles adored Motown, and they were inspired by groups like the Crystals and the Shirelles. They love Smokey Robinson. They were just, that was really where they got their inspiration.
That was my girl group, starting with the letter M.
Yep, it was.
What was their name?
Well, their first name was the Marvels, and I'll tell you a little story about them. This starts off in the early days of Motown, when Motown is just beginning. And a young girl named Georgia Dobbins from Inkster, Michigan, went to Motown to audition. And she got 4th place in the little contest that they had. But Berry Gordy said to her, I'll give you a recording contract if, and it was a big if you can come back to me with a hit song. So Georgia goes back to Inkster, Michigan, and she goes to one of her friends named William Gibson, who is a songwriter, and he's written a great song, Please, Mr. Postman. She asked him if she can borrow the song, and he says, yes, if you will credit me with the song. And she said, well, here's another favor I have to ask of you. Can I kind of rearrange it a little bit? And he said, well, let me see what you're going to do with it. She rearranges it. He likes it. And she takes that song and takes it back to Berry Gordy. And Berry Gordy says, yes, I like it, but I'm going to have my professionals work with it a little bit. So he puts Robert Bateman and Brian Holland of what will later be Holland Dozier Holland to work on the song, and they tweak it, and it becomes the very first #1 hit on Motown, the first ever. Now, when Georgia Dobbins lets her new group record it, and she does for Mr. Gordy, they change their name from the Marvels to the Marvelettes, and it becomes a big hit for the Marvelettes. Well, John usually liked to select cover songs that were rare and unheard and not very popular because he liked to find something new, a diamond in the rough. But this song had been #1, and he liked it so much he couldn't help it. He wanted to record it anyway. They do put their own spin on it, no doubt about it. This is another time where I just can't stress enough that the Beatles are great as composers and singer-songwriters, but we don't give them enough credit as just a great band. They can take any song and make it unique and different and their own, and that's what they do with this song. When Georgia Dobbins, when the Marvelettes record it, it's a slow, plaintive song from a girl who misses her boyfriend and wants a letter from him. Please, Mr. Postman, look and see. Is there a letter for me? Not when John sings it. When the Beatles do it, it's upbeat, it's peppy, it's happy, it's full of zest. They completely change the sound of the song. And the reason that they do that is John's thinking about all the fan mail that they get. The girls write on the outside of the fan letters, Postman, Postman, hurry up and do like the Beatles. Go, man, go. And they also write on the outside of the Beatles mail, deliver, de-letter, de-sooner, de-better, which he puts into the song. And he's thinking about the joy of fan mail and the girls and the fans who are hoping that someday they'll get a letter from Paul or Ringo or George or from him. So he speeds it up. It's no longer sad. It's a very happy song. And it just shows you what the Beatles can do. They've used that call and answer that they always use. And the more John sings the song, the raspier his voice becomes. And it's a very, very cool Beatles song. Paul and George do the answer, and they don't rush their answers. They're very definitive about it. And Ringo, look, when this song was first recorded, the drummer for this song was none other than Marvin gay.
I also
And
got to
Ringo-
say, if I may, the only song I can compare to this, because we're talking about the Postman, is the Elvis one, Return to Sender. Return to Sender. Address unknown. No such number. No such soul. I wrote a letter to the postman. He put it in his sack. Right early next morning, he brought my letter back.
Then the
It's
Beatles.
another song about letters in the postman.
Yeah. And then there's the one by the Box Tops, The Letter. Remember
I like
that?
one too.
Yeah. So there are a lot of
for an aeroplane. Ain't got time to catch no fast train. Only day I'm a coming home. My baby just wrote me a letter.
And then there's the Beatles, P.S. I Love You. There's another letter, P.S. I Love
As
You.
I write this letter, send my love to you. Remember that I'll always be in love with you.
You should do a whole show on songs about letters from
I'm going to keep the singing. All you have to do is mention every song from every album, and it's my job to sing a bit for you from memory. I'm doing all right so far. You haven't stumped me yet.
I have not stumped you one single time. So yeah, you are going with it. Well, Please Mr. Postman is going to end this side of With the Beatles. And that is great because it leaves people upbeat, happy, feeling like they're sitting in the Cavern Club again. The very first time that the boys got to go on TV in March of 1962 on a show called Here We Go, they chose Please Mr. Postman to be the song that they would sing. And so it's only fitting that it ends side one of With the Beatles, and we will reconvene before too long and we'll tackle side two, won't we, Plastic?
How great was that? I really enjoyed it. Now with the singing coming into it, it's really great. Don't tell me side two. I can't wait. So everyone out there, from Jude Kessler and Plastic EP, thanks for joining us. What a great show, Jude. I loved it. Thank you, Jude.
We had a good time.